Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Hugh Stewart and this is our nightly news programme, Scotland at 7. Today it's Wednesday the 20th of July. I'm going to be discussing the top stories tonight. First of all, in a couple of minutes, a Conservative leadership election, and we also have a story about space later on, connecting Glasgow to outer space. And I'm going to be discussing these stories with Chris McCusker, who I think is online just now, joining us from East Renfrewshire. Hello, Chris. Can you see? And there we are. Can you hear us okay, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely coming through loud and proud.
Smashing, good to see you again. So I'm going to begin, Chris, with the update from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Today, they're on day 147. Then we're going to discuss those top stories. So first of all, Russian President Vladimir Putin won the endorsement of the Iranian supreme leader for Russia's invasion of Ukraine during a visit to Tehran on Tuesday, yesterday. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei told Putin, "War is harsh, a difficult issue, and Iran is not at all pleased that ordinary people suffer from it. But in the case of Ukraine, if you had not taken the initiative, the other side would have caused the war on its own." He's referring to NATO. Putin said that progress had been made that may allow Russia to lift the blockade on Ukrainian wheat. "I want to thank you for your mediation efforts," he told Recep Tayyip Erdogan, his Turkish counterpart, during that trip to Tehran. Ukraine does not want the war to last into winter because it would give the Russian forces time to dig in and make any Ukrainian counter-offensive more difficult, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak. Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's former president, said the peace in Ukraine would be on Moscow's terms. Medvedev, now deputy head of Russia's Security Council, said, "Russia will achieve all its goals. There will be peace on our terms." Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Russia was laying the groundwork for the annexation of more Ukrainian territory and installing illegitimate proxy officials in the areas under its control. Mr. Kirby, unveiling what he said was US intelligence, said Russia was seeking to establish the ruble as a default currency and to force residents to apply for Russian citizenship. President Zelensky says he expected significant results for Ukraine following his wife's trip to Washington on Tuesday, yesterday, increasing American support for Ukraine, providing additional assistance to protect people from Russian terror, and addressing humanitarian needs are all the task of this ongoing visit of the First Lady of Ukraine to the US, he said. Olena Zelenska met her US counterpart Jill Biden on Tuesday ahead of her appearance later on today before members of Congress. That's probably happening quite soon, or maybe about now. The governor of the southern Ukraine region of Mykolaiv has offered $100, that's about £83, reward for anyone who can identify people collaborating with Russia. Another 6 French-made Caesar artillery guns are on their way to Ukraine, France's foreign minister has confirmed. 12 of the guns, prized for their accuracy and mobility, have already been delivered to Ukraine, and 6 others are on the way. The United States will announce a new weapons package for Ukraine in the coming days, a government official said. It's expected to include mobile rocket launchers known as the HIMARS and various artillery munitions. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you, if you haven't met him before, to our colleague Chris McCusker, who's down in Newton Mearns. Now, Chris is a trade unionist, activist, and helps to work with a refugee organisation in, I've asked you before, I think it's in Clarkston, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's we're based in East Renfrewshire, Hugh. We've got a hub in Clarkston, and since 2013, 2014, we've been helping our friends at Care for Cali, and obviously we stepped in with the UK resettlement scheme for the Afghan refugees, and obviously then the Ukrainian situation stepped up. So we don't discriminate if you're a refugee. We'll try and help you.
Yep. Okay, Chris, thank you. So we'll go straight to our top story, which you'll not be surprised to learn is about the Conservative leadership contest. We've just found out, of course, as I'm sure you have already, about 3 hours ago, the final 2 candidates. Liz Truss will face Rishi Sunak in the final round of the Conservative leadership election after a dramatic final day of voting by Conservative members of Parliament, which saw Penny Mordaunt knocked out of the race, having been second in the previous rounds. The fifth and last vote by Conservative MPs saw Sunak, the former Chancellor, top the poll easily on 137 votes. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, who had trailed Penny Mordaunt throughout the previous rounds, took 113 votes, just ahead of Mordaunt's 105. Sunak and Truss will now go to the next stage of the contest, which is a vote by Tory party members, with the winner succeeding Boris Johnson as Prime Minister in early September. The result means that a race which began with 8 candidates gradually whittled down over the rounds of increasingly dramatic voting, which has ended up with the final 2 candidates who could have been predicted long before Johnson was removed from office. Sunak and Truss have clashed over policies such as taxation and borrowing, and the next few weeks of the campaign could be equally brutal. In a statement, Penny Mordaunt congratulated the others but called on them to end the fighting. Politics isn't easy. She said it can be a divisive and difficult place. We must all now work together to unify our party, that's their party, and to focus on the job that needs to be done. With the postal ballots for party members due to start landing on doormats as early as the 1st of August, both candidates' teams will immediately start the next phase of the campaign. Truss's views are widely seen to be more in tune with those of Conservative Party members, notably her focus on tax cuts and a small state, whereas Sunak will seek to campaign as the more serious candidate, one better able to cope with the immediate crises such as the cost of living. The vote to Conservative Party members closes at 5 p.m. on the 2nd of September, and the winner will be announced on the 5th of September. They would most likely become formally Prime Minister the day afterwards. Commenting this afternoon, the SNP's Treasury spokesperson has said that Scotland can't afford to keep the UK Tory government, given Conservative heavyweights are prioritising their own internal fighting over cost of living support as inflation rises for the 9th month in a row to 9.4%. So more on the economic crisis later on, Chris, but first of all, as from a Scottish point of view, and with the referendum on independence scheduled for October next year, what do you think about the prospect of Liz Truss taking on Nicola Sturgeon in that debate?
Well, Nicola will wipe the floor there, to be brutally honest with you. I had foreseen that it was going to be Liz Truss in the final 2. I didn't think Sunak would get as far as this, but I mean, each one is as repugnant as the other, to be quite honest with you. And it was interesting to see Liz Truss on the last televised debate, where she purposely dressed herself up as Margaret Thatcher. The only thing that was missing was the handbag. She's trying to appeal to the Tory voters as being the moderate change, but I mean, honestly, I mean, to me, she's a Barbie girl personified. There's just a litany of gaffes that you can associate with her. I mean, the latest one was not finding the door on the way out of the hall where she was speaking. The classic one about the cheese. My personal favourite was the dogs at Pentonville Jail. The barking puts off the drones and stuff like that. So I mean that's a level of Prime Minister that we're looking at, folks, and you can take some solace in the fact that you didn't actually participate in the vote. Because it was undemocratically decided, the fact that the Tory party had the full monopoly on this, because I think the Tory party were clever. I think, honestly, had it went to a general election, it would have went to a hung parliament with the Labour Party having to rely on the other opposition, such as the Lib Dems and our good selves, and we could have been starting from a fresh start. This isn't a fresh start. Whether it's Truss or whether it's Sunak, it's not a fresh start.
Yes, they're both saying that they're trying to do two things at once. They've been saying we're the continuity candidate, but also we're nothing like Boris Johnson, so they're trying to keep Johnson supporters on board. But of course, what they're saying is only aimed at one audience, as you say, Chris. It's only the tiny number of people who are paid up members of the Conservative Party, so those are the only people they're talking to at the moment. Now, of course, I assumed at the top of this story that Liz Truss is going to win out the support of Conservative Party members. We don't know, of course, but I'm going on the latest polls today, in spite of the fact that Sunak obviously has more money to spend. He must have spent thousands on that campaign video, which was announced a couple of weeks ago. The guy's loaded. Okay, so presumably he's going to throw a lot of money at the campaign, so it might be Sunak. Anyway, let me just read out what the SNP has said on hearing the news, commenting on the Tory leadership contest. Ian Blackford has said, if Scotland had any say in the Tory leadership contest, both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak would have swiftly been shown the door. In this woeful race, it's clear whoever wins, Scotland loses. With the Tories lurching even further to the right and Labour Party backing them on austerity cuts and hard Brexit, it's beyond doubt that the only way to keep Scotland safe from the damage of Westminster control is to become an independent country. Westminster has never looked so arrogant and so out of touch. Independence is the only way to secure a permanent alternative and escape Westminster control for good. So that was Ian Blackford on the news. That's it. So it's going to be Sunak or Truss. Now, so of course, Ian Blackford raised the point of Scotland wanting to be in the European Union, of course. Now, both of these candidates and all the other six who have left have made it perfectly clear that Scotland has no say on anything. Do you see this as something that's going to play in favour of the Yes campaign as we move closer to the referendum next October?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Hugh, and I think it actually plays more in favour when Liz Truss is finally announced. Again, I made the prediction boldly last week. I don't believe that the Conservative Party have got it in their hearts to actually elect a Prime Minister from a minority ethnic background. Honestly, again, if they do, I will actually laud them for doing it, but I just don't see it happening. It's just call it intuition or whatever you like, but they are the British Unionist Party, and they have to hold on to some certain values that run, deeply ingrained within the actual Tory party, and their membership and their baseline electoralship would not countenance having a person from a minority ethnic background. So as much money as Sunak can throw at it, I will confidently say that it is going to be Liz Truss.
Well, you might be proven right then. So once we see how the campaign develops, if Sunak does indeed throw money at it but doesn't make any headway, then it could be you're right. So that's one change too far for the golf club type of Tories. But again, what are the policy differences? Are there any differences between the two of them that you can detect? Is Truss more right-wing, really? Is she going to be more of a Thatcherite tax cutter than Sunak?
Truss will model herself on Thatcher. I fully believe that. And Sunak is obviously, he's got ahead for statistics, mathematician, whatnot, what have you. It just, it doesn't apply to anybody under the wage bracket of £45,000. So I mean, Liz Truss is saying that she will, cut taxes, and Sunak saying no, there's that's economic suicide. We have to go steady and all the rest of it. And I don't think that will play too well in the lower echelons of the Conservative Party. I think Liz Truss will actually appeal to the median middle earners within the Conservative Party. I heard an interesting story in LBC. A guy phoned in, and he was a truck driver, a Tory voting truck driver, which I just couldn't get my head round. I really, honestly, couldn't get my head round that. I mean, he was all for bringing the party back to, having some moral fibre, such as what was shown in the days of Thatcher, and I, I mean, people would argue the fact that Sunak wouldn't stand up for wild parties and whatnot, what have you, and people being sick up the wall. You would like to think that it was a bit more staid than that, and a bit more professional. But honestly, I really do think that Liz Truss will see off Rishi Sunak, and again, that'll be great for the independence cause. Do you know what I mean? Because she is the loose of cannon, shall we say? I would say that Rishi Sunak is much more calm, much more considered, much more measured, and
Yes.
Liz Truss, honestly, you throw a packet of Smarties into the room, she would go bananas. You know,
So,
so I mean, I think that would be great for Scotland. I think Ian Blackford will be able to run rings round her.
mhm.
And Ian managed to run rings round Boris Johnson anyway. But honestly, I think when she's in post, when the Prime Minister walks in for PMQs, I don't think she'll get the big hurrahs and stuff like that the way that Boris Johnson got.
Yes, he was a rousing stage performer, really, apart from anything else. Yeah, but as you say, of course, Sunak is more polished, but he did make a gaffe today, of course, when he mistakenly put Darlington in Scotland. And just before we move on, Ian Blackford has underlined today on Twitter that Scotland has no plans to take over Darlington, unless the people there demand it. Okay, now moving on to the economic crisis, rising petrol and diesel prices for motorists and dearer food pushed Britain's annual inflation rate to a fresh 40-year high of 9.4% last month. Figures from the Office of National Statistics, that's the ONS, showed that the government's preferred measure of cost of living, which is the Consumer Prices Index, the CPI, was up from May's figure of 9.1 to 9.4%. Inflation, which had been 2.5% in June last year, has now risen for 9 months in a row, and the Bank of England is expecting it to peak at above 11% when the energy bills rise again in the autumn. The city had been forecasting inflation would pick up to 9.3% after the price of unleaded petrol rose by about 20p a litre in June. Markets are expecting the bank to respond to the highest inflation since 1982 by raising interest rates by either a quarter or a half of a percentage point when the committee meets next month. In a statement issued this afternoon, Alison Thulis, the SNP's Treasury spokesperson, said the Scottish Government is doing what it can with its limited powers, such as uprating benefits and mitigating the benefit cap and bedroom tax. But with 85% of social security spending reserved to Westminster, we're needing the UK Government to act too, and they haven't. Businesses are also impacted by soaring prices of raw materials and fuel, which will have a knock-on effect on consumer confidence. Sorry, this isn't Alison Thulis now, we've moved on. The UK government's inaction, this is Alison Thulis. UK government inaction risks exacerbating poverty and creating a deep recession, which could take years to recover from. That was the end of report from Alison Thulis MP. Yet more inflationary pressure could be in the pipeline, according to a separate ONS data for producer prices, which measures how firms are paying for their fuel and raw material, and the prices they charge to the consumers. The cost of both raw materials and goods leaving factories continue to rise, driven by higher metal and food prices, respectively, according to Grant Fitzner, who's the chief economist at the ONS. These increases saw raw materials post their highest annual rate increase on record, And finally, the UK Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi said countries around the world are battling higher prices, and I know how difficult it is for people right now here in the UK. So we are working alongside the Bank of England to bear down on inflation. We've introduced £37 billion worth of help for households, including at least 1,200 for 8 million of the most vulnerable families, and lifting over 2 million more of the lowest paid out of personal tax, out of paying tax. Okay, so Zahawi there is saying that the UK government is injecting money directly into people's pockets. Is Alison Thulis right to say that they're doing nothing? They are doing something, aren't they? But are they doing enough?
No, I mean honestly, Alison is 100% bang on the button. The figures that the Tories are massaging are wholly inaccurate anyway. So the commenting on the figures that they're quoting is actually a lie upon another lie. Because the Tories are quite clever to cite the fact that there are more people on the payroll than ever before. They don't actually say that there are more people employed because these people are not employed. They are talking about people who are self-employed, who are on 0-hour contracts, and are not eligible for any government help in any such way, shape, or fashion. Even if they are, what they have done is they have taken them out of the benefit system and put them into a separate system, which doesn't allow these people to be classed as benefit seekers because they are in work. Yes, they'll get top up work and tax credits, but that's not taken into consideration on the actual benefit system. When they're counting figures. The Tories have been able to massage, a whole raft of figures and data over the last 3 years in order to give off the illusion that Britain is actually being fiscally properly run, where in actual fact, we have, again, if you look back at Mr. Sunak, I believe it was something in the region of 148 million that was written off, for the PPE scandal that was just not investigated. You look at all the dodgy deals, and not just in the chamber of the House of Commons, but also it goes into the House of Lords as well, been well documented with Baroness Mon, and they're levelling up agenda and all the rest of it is just complete tokenism. It's basically build a bridge on a footpath, slap a butcher's apron on it, and and just basically say, the British government provided that for your community.
Yep.
And that is what Rishi Sunak wants to do. He wants to circumnavigate Holyrood, undermine Holyrood, and take away even more powers. So that they can basically slap a butcher's apron on it and and call it a success.
Aye, Conservative MPs have been saying that just this week. In fact, they've been boasting about the UK government's direct contact with the local authorities in Scotland. But of course, another way of putting that is to say ignoring the Scottish government, whose job it is to talk to our local authorities here. Now let's move on to the next story. Another headache for the government in the UK. The Royal Mail has reported it's losing £1 million a day and has threatened to split its business if it can't achieve what they call significant operational change as they face what could be the biggest strike of this summer. The day after thousands of its staff in the Communication Workers Union voted in favour of industrial action, the company said it was considering all options, including separating its domestic and international businesses under a rebranding holding company called International Distribution Services. The Communications Workers Union, the CWU, hit back calling the Royal Mail pathetic and accusing it of pleading poverty and threatening fragmentation to try to get its way in pay negotiations. The Royal Mail says its adjusted operating loss between April and June was 92 million and revenue was down 11.5%. That's in the period April to June. It blamed plunging deliveries of COVID-19 test kits and items bought online, a long-term decline in letters delivery, of course, and a disappointing performance in making its business more efficient. The company said it had worked to reduce its variable labour costs by cutting back on overtime and on the use of temporary workers, but had not been able to cut costs quickly enough to match the lower volumes of parcels and letters. On Tuesday, the CWU announced the results of its ballot on the postal worker members in the dispute over pay. Almost 97% voted in favour of strike action and a 77% turnout. The CWU and the Royal Mail are both said to be prepared to return to the negotiating table, but the union said that if a deal could not be reached, it would notify the company of the strikes which are expected to take place in August. Now, Chris, they are losing money. Is it the job of mail, well, it's what's really the privatised, but do most countries think it's a job of the postal service to make a profit, or is it there to be the nation's postal service?
Personally, I think it's there to be the nation's postal service, however well documented my conclavities are on the archipelagical royal family. The Royal Mail it hasn't really changed, since its inception. You take a letter along to a post box, they collect it, they sort it, and they distribute it. The incremental changes have obviously come in on the stamps, the charging for sending parcels and whatnot, and what have you. Back in the 60s, the 70s, early 80s, it was a standing joke sending something, by a parcel, because you were never sure if it was going to get there in one piece. Now, with the onslaught of the gig economy, there are companies out there, who are paying, regrettably, because they've been dragged into the 21st century, they are now paying the Tory minimum wage, for their drivers to go out and, actually deliver it. And you have the consumer has a wee bit more peace of mind because of technology now. That distributors will take a picture of your front door or where the parcel's left, or with your neighbours, what have you. Whereas Royal Mail never done that, and it was just I remember having conversations with the old DHSS, and them telling me, we have written to you 5 times, and I'm like, well, no, you haven't. Yep. And you need to prove that. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't prove it, because the postman's not been near my door once.
Well, everybody complains, don't they, about parcels that don't turn up when they were supposed to, but that could apply equally to the Royal Mail or to the various other privatised parcel services that you know about. But I guess the background to this really, of course, is the privatisation of the parcel business, which the Conservative government did a long time ago. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon delivered far more parcels than the Royal Mail does. I don't know the figures, but that would not surprise me. So there's competition. But I suppose, just before we move on, if Scotland votes for independence, of course, it'll be the Scottish Mail, so we'll have to decide what to do with it. And it has still a monopoly in letters, so they don't have a monopoly in parcels. So do you think the Scottish government would inherit that system? Loads of people delivering parcels and packages in the private sector, but still letters reserved to the Scottish Post Office.
Yeah, you would think that would be the case, Hugh, and of course that's obviously a conversation for Scotland to have. Once we're independent, there are many conversations that Scotland needs to have, but we have to get independent first. But in saying that, I have to I have to point out my solidarity for comrades in the CWU, and again, they deserve, as all the frontline workers, they deserve parity of esteem. Because they've been out in all weathers, they've been out during COVID, and all the
Yeah,
rest of it,
yeah.
and so I mean it's wholly wanted.
Okay, so let's move on, Chris. So that's a possible strike by the CWU, and that would be UK wide, of course, because there's only one postal service in the UK. Now we're going to move on to a story which mainly affects public sector workers in England. We hear today that England's nurses, doctors, and teachers moved towards strike action on Wednesday today, demanding that wages keep pace with soaring prices, as the UK government defends its decision to award below inflation pay rises for public sector workers. This comes a day after the UK government ministers announced a series of pay rises for 2 million public sector staff, while, as we said earlier on, inflation has hit its 40-year high at 9.4% in June, several workers' unions mooting industrial action. The pay settlements were as high as 9.3% for the lowest earners in Britain's publicly funded National Health Service, but many fell far short of the rate at which prices are rising. The Royal College of Nursing said it had decided to ballot members on whether they wanted to take industrial action. This is a grave misstep by ministers. With this low award, the government is misjudging the mood of nursing staff and the public too, said the RCN's chief executive, Pat Cullen. Living costs are rising, and yet they have enforced another real terms pay cut on nursing staff. The British Medical Association, which represents doctors, said it was on a collision course with the UK government, and the National Education Union, which represents many teachers in England, said it would recommend strikes unless the government renegotiates. UK Treasury Minister Simon Clarke said that the settlements were extremely generous, in his words, by recent standards. We're trying to strike the right balance between recognising the vital service that all these 2 million people bring to our country, but also balancing that against the risk of fueling the inflation problem and making it more permanent and harder to tackle quickly by settling above inflation pay, he told Times Radio. Meanwhile, here, the Scottish Government has announced that NHS medical and dental staff will be awarded a 4.5% increase for this year, and that's going to be backdated to April. This is for all NHS Scotland medical and dental staff, GPs and general dental practitioners. This comes following recommendations by the Independent Doctors and Dentists Pay Review Body in Scotland of an annual uplift of 4.5% for NHS medical and dental staff. The Scottish Government has accepted this recommendation. So that 4.5% builds on the 3% uplift that was recommended and applied by the Scottish Government in 2021, meaning staff here have been awarded 7.5% over the last 2 years. Public sector pay rises in England will affect the devolved governments, of course, through the ballot consequentials. So, Chris, this is really the big story that's rumbling underneath with the economy, isn't it? It's what can the UK government do about inflation? Now, can you see that they've got an issue? Whoever takes over here, they're talking about keeping wage rises below inflation because they fear, well, runaway inflation and the devastation that would cause. Can you see there's an issue there that people have to talk about? How to deal with
Yeah,
inflation?
and this is why the post of prime minister is effectively a poison chalice, as far as I can see, because Rishi Sunak will deny any incremental pay increases, and he will obviously carry on the negative arguments towards the unions and stuff like that, which we've seen play out recently with comrades in the RMT. And Boris Johnson has played that to death by inventing what they call union barons, which clearly don't exist. There are no union barons, and my 30 years of being a union rep, I have never once met a union baron. So I don't know who he's trying to describe there. But again, on the other side of the argument is Liz Truss is saying that she wants to cut taxes so that there's more money in people's pockets, and therefore they won't need a wage rise because that cutting taxes will mitigate one and all the rest of it. It's a difficult balance that the both of them have to play. Now, again, and wonderfully, I have to commend you for the way that you've actually framed the actual question, Hugh, because yes, that is correct. Scotland has got its own devolved health service, and we, the Scottish Government, have taken on the recommendations of the medical bodies, and in recognition, for the second year running, medical practitioners, dental practitioners, are going to get another wage rise, which will take them, as you quite rightly said, 2% last year, 4.5% this year, and that will then take them up. The other underlying problems that the UK government have got on a wider scale is the fact that they're still at loggerheads with the RMT nationally. They're also still at loggerheads with England's barristers in their legal and judicial system as well. And it is, brewing up to what you would call a perfect storm. And I only wish, I'm praying for this, but if we had a stronger Labour opposition, then we would have, the basis for a general national strike, and that would be the only way to bring down the Tory party.
Yep, well, I think we'll probably have to wait a while for that, because it looks to me from what we were saying earlier on and looking at comments, I think Keir Starmer reckons that he's going to be Prime Minister in 2 years with business as usual. I think what they're in the business of doing at the moment is watching the Conservatives tear lumps out of each other, and he thinks he's going to be the beneficiary. Well, we'll see what happens. There'll be some water to flow under some bridges before we get there. Right, I better move on, Chris. Thank you for that. And I'm going to look at a story on gas and the European Union now. The EU told its member states on Wednesday today to cut gas usage by 15% until March next year as an emergency step, after President Vladimir Putin warned that Russian gas supplies sent via the biggest pipeline to Europe could be reduced further and might even stop. The deliveries via the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which accounts for more than a third of Russia's gas exports to the EU, are due to resume on Thursday tomorrow, following a 10-day halt for annual maintenance. The head of Germany's network regulator, who's Klaus Müller, said that initial nominations for gas flows via Nord Stream 1 into Germany stood at 800 gigawatt hours for July the 21st, adding that this could still change by tomorrow. On July 10th, the last full day before maintenance, the flows stood at around 698 gigawatts per hour. Supplies via that route had been reduced even before the maintenance outage in a dispute over sanctions, and these may be cut even further, while flows via other routes, such as through Ukraine, have also fallen since Russia invaded its neighbour in February. The disruptions have hampered Europe's efforts to refill gas storage before winter, raising the risk of rationing and another hit to fragile economic growth if Moscow further restricts flows in retaliation for Western sanctions over the war in Ukraine. The European Commission proposed a voluntary target for all EU states to cut gas use by 15%. This is from August this year through to March next spring. That's 15% compared with their average consumption over the previous 5 years. Russia is blackmailing us. Russia is using energy as a weapon, and therefore, in any event, whether it's partial or a major shut-off of Russian gas or a total cut-off of Russian gas, Europe needs to be ready, said EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The Commission's proposals would enable Brussels to make the target mandatory in a supply emergency if the EU declared a substantial risk of severe gas shortages. The move, which needs the backing of all EU states, will be discussed this Friday so that ministers can approve it by the 26th of July. We believe that a full disruption is likely, one EU official said. If we wait, it will be more expensive and it will mean us dancing to Russia's tune. The EU states are trying to ensure storage facilities are at 80% full by the 1st of November, from about 65% at the moment. Okay, so There's no doubt about it, Chris. Russia is using gas and grain as a bargaining tool, and they seem. Do you think the Russians are able to do this? Can they actually cut off the flow of money? Obviously, they export their gas for money, for Western money. So, yeah, do you think Putin will go ahead and say, yeah, you're not getting any more gas unless you drop the sanctions? And can Putin put up with the loss of revenue? How do you see the strategy going?
Well, I mean, again, this is another double-edged sword, and on one hand, you would say that Putin is holding all the cards because he's in control of the gas, but by the same token, he obviously needs paid for that gas. We know the fact that the level of sanctions has staved off an awful lot of investment into Russia, and the ruble is performing at its all-time low. In any economy, you need cash to circulate around communities. And that's what he's desperately trying to do. And unless he has hard cash for one of his biggest commodities, then he's stuck between the rock and a hard place. So
Yeah, well, I think we'll just move on just now. Anyway, it's certainly a bargaining chip. Obviously, Russia still intends to export gas to India and China, but there clearly will be a shortfall in revenue if they do actually go ahead and cut off gas to Europe. We do have a story on alternative energy later on, so maybe Europe should have been investing in alternative energy before now. Now, talking on switching energy, a story from America now. US President Joe Biden will unveil new executive steps to address climate change in a visit to Massachusetts, which is happening probably about now. These measures are expected to fall short of declaring a federal emergency, as many Democrats had urged. Democratic lawmakers and environmental groups have been calling for the White House to take aggressive measures on climate change after Conservative Democrat Senator Joe Manchin said last week he was not ready to support key climate provisions in Congress, and that was a critical loss in the evenly divided Senate. In a visit to Somerset, Massachusetts, President Biden will stress that climate change is, as he put it, an existential threat to our nation and to the world. And he said, we'll make it clear that since Congress is not going to act on this emergency, then we will, according to a White House official. The steps include providing more funding for a program that helps local communities expand flood control, shore up utilities, retrofit buildings, as well as another that helps low-income families pay for heating and cooling costs, according to a White House official. President Biden will also announce new support for the domestic offshore wind industry, the official said. In Massachusetts, the president will visit a former coal-fired power plant that is now playing a role in supporting the state's offshore wind industry as a manufacturing hub for undersea cables. That illustrates the switch from fossil fuels to renewables that Biden has been promoting as critical to reducing climate emissions. President Biden has also been under pressure to declare a climate emergency, which would enable the use of the Defence Production Act to ramp up production of a wide range of renewable energy products and systems. Senator Jeff Merkley and 8 other Democrats sent a letter to Biden on Wednesday urging him to declare a climate emergency and to use aggressive executive actions to limit emissions from fossil fuels produced on public lands and waters and to maximise the use of electric vehicles. But the president is not expected to declare a climate emergency today, even as the heat wave swept across the country and threatened millions of Americans, as well as threatening the power grid. President Biden promised tough action on climate change in his presidential campaign and pledged in international climate negotiations to cut climate pollution by 50% by 2030 and to reach 100% clean electricity by 2035. But that climate agenda has been derailed by several major setbacks, including Congress failing to pass crucial climate and clean energy measures in the federal budget bill, record-setting gasoline prices and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, disrupting global energy markets. So, Chris, unless you've got a quick comment, I'm looking at the clock, we better move on. So,
the only thing that I would say is the fact that, at least Biden's talking about the climate because, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, because Westminster's been paralysed because of the sideshow it hasn't really been, the subject of debate. And obviously, you can see by the weather here, I think it's absolutely imperative that we need to be debating this stuff.
Yep, and it is extraordinary, isn't it, that none of the Conservative candidates even mentioned the climate change or climate emergency, even as we were sweltering. Right, so I want to move on to the next story. Of course, there's been continuing unrest in Sri Lanka, forcing a Prime Minister out. So Sri Lanka's Prime Minister, Wickremesinghe, has been elected as President to replace the ousted Rajapaksa, in a result which is likely to promote turmoil among protesters who have been calling for weeks for him to resign. Wickremesinghe, who has been Prime Minister 6 times but never President until now, won a comfortable victory in Parliament on Wednesday today. That was this morning, where MPs voted for the new President in an unprecedented secret ballot. The vote came after protesters forced Rajapaksa from office amid rising anger about the spiralling economic crisis. Wickremesinghe, who comes from an old political lineage, faces a tough road ahead as Sri Lanka continues to be crippled by the worst economic crisis since independence, with shortages of food and fuel, and it also grapples with the deep crisis of trust in Parliament. Wickremesinghe's election follows a dramatic week in Sri Lanka, during which Rajapaksa was toppled after his offices and presidential palace were stormed by thousands of protesters who jumped in his pool and worked out in his gym. Amid the anger, Rajapaksa was forced to flee to Singapore via the Maldives, and his resignation was formally announced last Friday. This is the first time in Sri Lanka's history that a sitting president has been toppled mid-term by a mass protest movement. There has been fierce resistance and protests on the streets against a Wickremesinghe presidency. Although he had offered to resign as the protests engulfed the streets last week, he did not resign and instead accepted the role of acting president after Rajapaksa stepped down. Many fear that Wickremesinghe will protect the Rajapaksas from being held accountable, as he has been accused of doing in the past, and would not instigate the constitutional change being demanded by the protest movement, including an end to the system of executive presidency. So that's not exactly what the protesters were looking for, were they, for Wickremesinghe to make himself Prime Minister and President? So that's hardly going to call off the protests, is it? Because people are like here, finding it very difficult to pay the bills, and the economy is in a mess, and you've got this entrenched political class. So can you see any way they're going to go?
I know, and the main thing to come out of here is exactly as what's playing out in Westminster. It's a denial of democracy, and unfortunately, Sri Lanka is actually in danger of being run by essentially a despot. That is equally not enjoying the highlights of his political career as the Prime Minister, and now they have the audacity to shove him in as President. It won't play down well. There is rising inequality. There's, as you quite rightly pointed out, gross food shortages, water shortages as well, energy shortages, which every country is facing at this moment in time. And what the citizens were calling for was better management. What you're getting is the fact that the person who was in charge of this has actually been promoted out of mismanagement.
Yep.
So that will not play well on the streets of Sri Lanka, that's for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to 2 stories left now. I did promise at the top of the programme we were going to talk about space. Let's get into orbits now. The UK Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy has announced that £3 million of grant funding will be made available for space-based solar power projects, which collects the sun's energy using solar panels orbiting the Earth, and can deliver clean energy day and night unaffected by the weather. I should use a future tense. This is, of course, just on the design stage. These don't exist yet. The technology has the potential to boost energy security by providing a reliable, affordable alternative to expensive and volatile fossil fuels while reducing the UK's contribution to climate change. Grant funding will also be made available for cutting-edge cutting-edge weather monitoring sensors to aid more accurate weather forecasts. The sensors will be put in orbit for the first time thanks to a partnership with data and analytics company Spire Global. The work will be carried out both in Oxfordshire at Ariel Space and in Glasgow, where Spire Global has its UK headquarters and its satellite manufacturing facility. The space industry supported 8,440 jobs in Scotland in 2020, and that's almost a fifth of the total jobs in the space sector across the whole of the UK. That's approximately 46,900 jobs in the UK, and about a fifth of them are in Scotland, a lot of those in Glasgow. The UK space sector generates an income of £16.5 billion a year. Scotland will also host the UK's first vertical small satellite launches next year from Saxiford and from the Sutherland spaceports. First of all, on the space industry, is this a thing that excites you, Chris, the fact that we have new technologies going into orbit and a lot of them are going to be based in Scotland?
Well, it excites me from the point of view that it's got the potential to create jobs. I'm just an old fart. I get excited at basic things. I mean, when you originally said that we were discussing, space, I thought we were going to be talking about a Star Trek episode from years ago. I mean, my tiny brain can compute all these space things and stuff like that and technology, but my primary concern is, how much revenue it will garner for the Scottish economy, how many jobs it will create. Will those jobs be obviously green jobs? It's obviously going to do a lot of research and development into sustainable, fuel, which is always good for the planet going forward. So, from that point of view, I can get, excited. When you start talking about, megatons and megamiles and all the rest of it, I think we'll leave that if, the experts like William Shatner.
Well, I wasn't so much thinking of Star Trek as Star Wars, because I had a look at the technology, and there will be a huge mirror in space about a mile long, a huge mirror in orbit collecting sun's rays, then turning that into microwaves, then sending it down to the surface onto a receiving field, which will be about 6 kilometers wide or something like that. So it's microwaves, right? So I was thinking they're going to beam a microwave from orbit down to Earth, right? What happens if you wander through that microwave beam? Well, I did have a look at this earlier on. They do believe it is safe, right? So that's what first occurred to me. Beaming energy down to the planet, is that a good idea? But the other thing that occurs to me, I really would like to ask the Scottish Green Party if they're in favour of this kind of technical solution, because I think Greens would probably say, why don't we just insulate the houses? Why don't we just stop wasting energy instead of Star Wars, new ways of making new energy?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I've got, some solidarity with the Greens on that front. The Scottish Government could be doing some, retrofitting at this moment in time, which could actually create, a sustainable industry for Scotland going forward with regards to building trade. So I mean, they're quite right to ask those questions. But I'd be surprised if the Greens are not on board with this, because obviously it's got nothing to do with fossil fuels for a start. So if anything's got nothing to do with fossil fuels, the Greens are normally all over it.
I can see that point, yeah. By the way, I must emphasise, I haven't spoken to anyone from the Scottish Green Party. I was just wondering if that would be their response. I'd like to hear from them and ask what they do think of technological solutions like this. But it is as it produces the microwaves, it's not going to produce any pollution. You've still got to, of course, get the satellites up into orbit, first of all, from Sutherland or from Shetland. Right, I'm just going to quickly move on to our final story tonight. While we're in the Highlands, the Highland Council has launched a new scheme which will buy up properties in the area to prevent second homeowners from letting out their homes on Airbnb. The pilot scheme encourages property owners to sell directly to the local authority in a bid to ease housing pressures in the Highlands as soaring house prices and a rise in short-term lets freezes local people out of the house market. While the maximum purchase price is usually capped at 180,000, a higher figure is considered in some cases, and the council has waived the requirement in Scotland for sellers to pay for the home report. Sellers also do not have to pay estate agent fees with their homes valued instead by the council or by another professional. Alan Maguire, the head of development and regeneration at Highlands Council, said the scheme was started after the local authority was approached by several homeowners who had inherited a property from their parents and who wanted to keep it in the community. While sellers may be able to get a better price selling on the open market, Mr Maguire added that the council had adopted a hearts and minds approach and sellers would still get market value. The initiative has attracted interest from 130 sellers across the Highlands since the start of this year, with 40 properties already purchased by the council, according to the Daily Telegraph. Mr Maguire said, people will sometimes say to us their parents lived in the area all their lives and they don't want to sell it on the open market for it to be used as an Airbnb. Rather than selling the property, which will then be used as a holiday home, we will pay market value for it, but will not require a home report. He added that the council hopes to buy up more properties as the word gets out, and it's at an extremely challenging time for delivery of affordable housing. Oh, so, Chris, this is a situation you hear about not just in the Highlands, but you also hear about it in the Lake District and in Wales, where the nicest wee cottages, nobody actually lives there. It's just somebody who lives in the city who comes out once or twice a year for the wee hoose in the country. So this is happening really anywhere in the country areas, isn't it? I suppose you support this. Do you think there should be increased, this idea of keeping it in the community?
Definitely, Hugh. Yeah, you know, and I think even if this is just a pilot scheme, I would hope to see it, rolled out across the whole of Scotland. Obviously, I'm thinking about Edinburgh here, which has got a higher proportion of Airbnb. But yeah, it's a radical way of thinking, and it's one that's going to, benefit the government and also benefit the consumer. So, yeah, it's a win-win.
Yep.
Brilliant policy.
And I'm assuming the idea if the council is paying 180 or 200,000 for a house, I presume they get the money back from rent eventually, so it's not going to be diminishing the pot. Okay, well done, Highland Islands Council for trying to deal with the whole problem of holiday homes and excess tourism, if you like. So that's it from Scotland at 7 tonight. Andrew's doing the show tomorrow. So thank you to Chris for joining us tonight to discuss tonight's stories. Now, let me finish by saying that the reason we are in business, the reason we are on air at Broadcasting Scotland is because we feel that stories at a UK level aren't really adequately covered in Scotland. For example, when we were writing out the story today on UK pay rises and possible strike action, we have to distinguish between the UK government and the Scottish government. And some national broadcasters don't do that. And that's why I think we need to report the news from Scotland's point of view and say what parts of Rose's story are important to Scotland and how does it affect us. So we endeavour to do that at Broadcasting Scotland. Now, we're only on air because of the support of the people who have looked at the website on the screen below and signed up. And I urge you to do that, even starting at a direct debit of £5 a month. You'd be one of our supporters, and you are the people who are keeping us going. So if you are one of our subscribers, thank you for doing that, and I urge you to see if you can dip into your pockets and produce a £5 direct debit so we can keep going and hopefully extend the range of programmes we make. So that's it from me and from Chris McCusker tonight. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Good night.
Good night.